This wasn't just a Western. It was an epic gamble that rewrote Hollywood history. Dances with Wolves exploded onto the screen in 1990, transforming Kevin Costner from actor to auteur, and from underdog to Oscar king. But behind the sweeping planes and unforgettable imagery lurked secrets, clashes, disasters, and choices that could have destroyed everything. Did you know the film almost collapsed before it even began? Tonight, we're revealing 25 secrets hidden for decades that prove this movie's story off-screen was every bit as dramatic as the one on it. Kevin Costner's friends begged him not to make it. This wasn't just a risky project. It was professional suicide. Or so everyone thought. By the late 1980s, Kevin Costner was still proving himself in Hollywood. He had starred in The Untouchables and Bull Durham, but he wasn't yet the kind of bankable star who could carry a 3-hour Western on his shoulders, let alone direct it. When word spread that he planned to adapt Dances with Wolves into a sweeping epic, his closest friends staged what was almost an intervention. They told him bluntly, "Don't do it. This will sink you." Studios had already branded Westerns box office poison, and no one wanted to revisit a genre they considered dead. To complicate things further, Costner had never directed a feature film in his life. The combination sounded reckless, if not delusional. But Costner wasn't listening. He believed in Michael Blake's story with a conviction that overpowered every warning. What looked like blind arrogance became sheer determination. By ignoring the chorus of doubters, he transformed himself from a respected actor into an Academy Award-winning filmmaker and silenced every critic who said he was committing career suicide. The script was saved from the trash. What audiences didn't know was that this classic nearly vanished forever. Michael Blake, the writer behind Dances with Wolves, had endured years of rejection. He'd written scripts no one bought, lived on scraps, and drifted dangerously close to quitting Hollywood entirely. Frustrated and broke, he literally threw his screenplay for Dances with Wolves in the trash. That could have been the end. But Costner, who believed in Blake's talent, convinced him not to give up. He encouraged Blake to adapt the screenplay into a novel instead, something that at least might reach an audience in print. Blake reluctantly did it, and the gamble worked. The novel was published in 1988, with only modest sales at first, but its very existence made the project real, something tangible to pitch. Suddenly producers saw potential where before there had been nothing but rejection. Without that novel, without Costner's stubborn encouragement, the story of John Dunbar and his transformation on the frontier might never have been filmed at all. Hollywood history was altered by a friendship and a manuscript that escaped the trash. No studio wanted to touch it. This wasn't just rejection. It was a tidal wave of disbelief. In the late 1980s, Westerns were thought to be dead weight. Studios saw them as dusty relics of the past, unable to compete with the explosive appeal of action flicks, thrillers, or high-concept comedies. So when Kevin Costner and Michael Blake pitched Dances with Wolves, they weren't greeted with cautious interest. They were laughed out of boardrooms. Executives dismissed it as a 3-hour Western with subtitles, a death sentence at the box office. Even worse, it was going to be directed by an actor with zero experience behind the camera. Costner tried every major studio. Every single one said no. Instead of abandoning the dream, he turned to independent financing, calling in favors, chasing investors, and even digging into his own wallet. The final budget ballooned to more than $20 million, huge money for an outsider project at the time. It wasn't just his reputation on the line. If the movie failed, it would have bankrupted him. Against all odds, that desperation gave the film a fierce independence and made its eventual triumph all the sweeter. The buffalo hunt almost killed the crew. This wasn't movie magic. This was pure, terrifying chaos. The legendary buffalo hunt scene remains one of the most electrifying sequences ever captured on film. But what it took to shoot bordered on madness. Costner refused to fake it with miniatures or early CGI. He wanted authenticity. That meant wrangling more than 3,500 real buffalo across South Dakota plains. The animals were massive, unpredictable, and deadly. Once they stampeded, no one could control them. Stunt riders and wranglers put their lives at risk, galloping alongside a storm of hooves that could crush them in an instant. Cameramen filmed from trucks, cranes, and even on horseback, trying not to get trampled. Some admitted later they thought someone might die. To heighten the spectacle, Costner rode himself in several shots, refusing to use doubles for key moments. What audiences saw in theaters wasn't CGI. It was raw danger, captured live. The risk paid off. The buffalo hunt became one of the most unforgettable set pieces of the 1990s. But for those who filmed it, it wasn't entertainment. It was survival. The Lakota language was rescued by the film. This wasn't just accuracy. It was preservation. Costner insisted that the Lakota Sioux language be spoken authentically on screen, even if it meant heavy use of subtitles. At first, this horrified distributors, who worried American audiences would never tolerate too much reading. But Costner stood firm. He hired language coaches, cultural consultants, and native actors to ensure authenticity down to the smallest detail. The result? Millions of viewers worldwide heard Lakota spoken for the very first time. For many Native communities, this wasn't just entertainment. It was validation. In schools and universities, teachers began using the film as a cultural reference point. Linguists noted a surge of interest in the Lakota language, with young people inspired to learn words they'd never heard from their elders. Inadvertently, a Hollywood epic became a tool of cultural preservation. What studios saw as a liability turned into one of the film's greatest contributions, reviving global awareness of a language on the edge of fading away. The Lakota dialogue didn't just ground the movie, it helped breathe life back into history. Graham Greene stole scenes by accident. This wasn't just strong acting, it was magnetic presence. Graham Greene, who played the thoughtful medicine man Kicking Bird, wasn't originally intended to be the emotional anchor of Dances with Wolves. His role was supportive, meant to enrich the story rather than dominate it. But on set, something extraordinary happened. Greene's natural stillness and subtle gestures drew the camera in. His quiet confidence made every scene resonate with gravity, whether he was watching Costner's character struggle with new customs or delivering lines with piercing clarity. Greene never overplayed, he simply embodied dignity, and in doing so, he turned Kicking Bird into the soul of the Sioux tribe on screen. Critics immediately took notice. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor, making him one of the few Native actors in history to reach that recognition. What makes it even more remarkable is that Greene didn't try to dominate the film. He just let authenticity guide him. In a movie filled with spectacle, Greene proved that sometimes the quietest performance can thunder the loudest. Kevin Costner's brother doubled for dangerous scenes. This wasn't just stunt work. It was family loyalty played out in the dust and wind of the South Dakota plains. Kevin Costner's younger brother, Dan Costner, wasn't a professional stuntman by trade, but he was an accomplished rider and athlete. And when the production needed someone to fill in for dangerous horseback sequences, Dan stepped forward. On the wide plains where buffalo thundered and horses bolted, Dan mounted up and performed high-speed gallops, risky close passes, and maneuvers that could easily have ended in disaster. At times, he wore Kevin's costume, blending so seamlessly that even fans today can't tell when they're watching Dan instead of Kevin. To the audience, it was just another sweeping shot of John Dunbar racing across the frontier. But behind the scenes, it was a brother literally putting his life on the line to bring authenticity to his sibling's dream project. Hollywood often talks about loyalty, but in Dances with Wolves, it wasn't a cliché. It was blood. The studio tried to cut the Lakota subtitles. This wasn't an artistic debate. It was a clash of ideals. Distributors and financiers panicked when they saw how much of the dialogue in Dances with Wolves was spoken in Lakota. They worried American audiences, conditioned to fast-paced entertainment, would balk at reading subtitles for minutes on end. The pressure mounted. Cut the dialogue down. Dub it into English. Simplify. But Costner refused. For him, the authenticity of native language was not negotiable. If the Lakota characters spoke English, the film's honesty would collapse. Costner took the battle head-on, insisting audiences could and would embrace it. When the movie was released, he was vindicated. Far from alienating viewers, the subtitles drew them deeper into the world of the Sioux, giving the story a rhythm that no translation could match. Critics hailed the decision as groundbreaking. What had been treated as a liability became a badge of artistic courage. Costner's gamble not only worked, it helped prove that mainstream audiences were more open-minded than Hollywood gave them credit for. The wolf wasn't easy to tame. This wasn't Hollywood trickery. It was pure frustration turned into magic. The wolf companion, Two Socks, was actually played by two trained wolves named Buck and Teddy. While they looked majestic on screen, behind the scenes they were notoriously difficult. Trainers would spend hours coaxing the animals into position, only for them to bolt, growl, or simply ignore the crew. Costner admitted that entire shooting days were lost waiting for the wolves to cooperate. In some takes, they had to trick the animals with hidden treats or use long lenses to capture natural behavior from a safe distance. Yet those headaches paid off in unforgettable moments, the way Two Socks cautiously approaches Dunbar, the scenes of playful trust, and the heartbreaking loyalty that defines the wolf's story arc. Ironically, the unpredictability that made filming so hard also made the wolf feel real, not staged. Two Socks became a character audiences wept for, remembered as vividly as any human in the film. What was a nightmare to shoot became pure cinematic poetry. A cast of unknowns paid off. This wasn't Hollywood star power. It was authenticity winning the day. When assembling the Sioux tribe, Costner made a radical choice for the time. He bypassed famous actors and cast native performers who were relatively unknown. Tantoo Cardinal, Rodney A. Grant, Floyd Red Crow Westerman, and others weren't big names in 1990. But they brought something priceless: credibility. Their performances gave the tribe depth, dignity, and individuality, shattering decades of lazy Hollywood stereotypes. Cardinal's strength as Black Shawl and Grant's ferocity as Wind in His Hair resonated as deeply as Costner's own star turn. For audiences, it was a revelation. Native characters weren't just background. They were central, nuanced, and fully human. The gamble transformed these actors into cultural icons and set a new standard for casting in indigenous roles. By rejecting the safe option of hiring marquee names in makeup, Costner proved that authenticity could sell tickets and win Oscars. The film's power rested not just on sweeping vistas, but on real faces telling real stories. The original cut was 5 hours long. This wasn't just an epic, it was nearly endless. Kevin Costner's original assembly of Dances with Wolves ran for more than 5 hours, an odyssey that no commercial theater would dare screen. The sprawling version included extended scenes of Dunbar's isolation at Fort Sedgwick, longer cultural exchanges with the Sioux, and additional tribal sequences that expanded character arcs. Costner knew it was too long for mainstream audiences, but he struggled with what to cut. With his editor, Neil Travis, they whittled it down to just under 4 hours, and then trimmed again for wide release to a 3-hour version. Years later, a special edition restored nearly an hour of missing footage, giving fans a taste of the director's true vision. That version was hailed for its depth, showing even more of the delicate cultural exchanges and human moments that define the story. But imagine the courage it took to cut away hours of hard-won footage, sacrificing scenes he loved in order to keep the narrative alive. For Costner, it wasn't just editing, it was surgery. Test screenings were a disaster. This wasn't reassurance, it was a nightmare. Early test screenings of Dances with Wolves were painful to watch, literally. Audience members squirmed in their seats, some muttering that it was too slow, too long, or just another Western. Several even walked out. Executives panicked, thinking they had sunk millions into a doomed vanity project. Kevin Costner's phone rang constantly with suggestions. Cut 45 minutes, lose the subtitles, focus more on action. But Costner refused. He knew that trimming the heart out of the film would destroy what made it unique. He trusted the emotional build, the slow rhythm, and the authenticity of language and detail. Critics later praised exactly what those test audiences rejected: the patience of the storytelling and its immersion into another culture. Ironically, the disaster screenings became a blessing in disguise, hardening Costner's resolve to protect his vision. What seemed like failure was actually the crucible that forged an Oscar-winning masterpiece. If you're hooked on these secrets, go ahead and like and subscribe, because we're only halfway through, and the wildest ones are still coming. The film nearly bankrupted Kevin Costner. This wasn't a small risk. It was financial roulette. When studios abandoned the project, Kevin Costner shouldered the financial burden himself. He poured millions of his own money into production. Estimates put his personal stake at nearly $3 million. But as delays mounted, costs skyrocketed. The budget ballooned from the planned $15 million to more than $22 million. Bad weather, equipment failures, and the massive buffalo hunt pushed expenses higher. Costner's friends whispered that he was about to ruin himself, both financially and professionally.